I had about 8 or 9 guys jump out of their chairs. We went out, and it was a Fiat. And they picked the thing up, and they got underneath it, got ready, and they got one of the guys that with the leader of the group, and they lifted the thing up and put it on the sidewalk. He said, so the bus driver, he took the bus around and down into the drive, and then he stopped and said, when you put the car back, put it back so the guy's going to know that it was moved. So we did. We put the back end of it, turned around a completely different way, and up on the sidewalk.
Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we explore aspects of music and musician life that may not have been covered in music school. Now, one of the things I absolutely love about this podcast is the chance that I get to talk with musicians from all over the country, from all different walks of life. And I love to learn about their lives and about the many diverse and meaningful careers that they've made for themselves through music. And since it's the fall and since so many students across the U.S. are going back to school, I thought it would be a perfect day to learn about the world of school music and as school educators from the standpoint of an educator. And so with that, I would like to introduce you to a very gifted musician and a talented educator, William C. Davis, or as I like to call him, Uncle Bill. And so here is a little bit of background about Uncle Bill. A native of Naugatuck, Connecticut, Mr. Davis was a choral director and music coordinator at the Naugatuck High School from 1973 to 2001. He had an outstanding choral program of 5 choral ensembles involving 250 to 300 students. He was also a varsity tennis and varsity soccer coach for 22 years. Mr. Davis has earned degrees from Ohio Wesleyan University, New York University, and the University of Bridgeport, with additional study at the Hart School of Music and the University of Connecticut. Mr. Davis has served as a frequent adjudicator and has been a guest conductor at festivals in Portland, Durham, and Ellington, Connecticut, and at the CMEA Southern Region Music Festival. Mr. Davis has been a guest choral conductor at the Laurel Music Camp for 9 different seasons. He has conducted the Heritage Singers in Southbury, Connecticut for 14 years. And under direction of Mr. Davis, the Naugatuck High School Chamber Singers performed extensively throughout New England, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, and Quebec and Nova Scotia, Canada. In addition, 6 European concert tours were made to Germany, Austria, France, Italy, Ireland, and England. Since retiring in 2001, Mr. Davis directed the Naugatuck Community Chorus, is the director of a 75-voice male chorus, the Barnstormers, since 2005, and directed the Keene Choral for over 6 years. So, William C. Davis, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Musicians versus the World.
Well, thank you very much. I should say, many people call me Mr. Davis, but my students call me Mr. D, or if they were in a rush, just D, which I answer to all of the above.
Yeah. Well, just reading your bio and listening to all of the things that you've done, it seems like you've really made a huge impact on hundreds and hundreds of students. Is that what you always wanted to do? Did you always want to be a teacher and a choral director?
Yes, it took a while to get there, only because I'll give you a quick background. My father was a choral director and a very successful one. And he was at Naugatuck High School also. And I didn't want to do what many people thought would be the obvious thing, follow your dad's footsteps. And so I kind of resisted that. And when I got my master's degree at NYU, right after I got my master's, I had done ROTC as an undergrad, and this was during the Vietnam conflict. And I got called up, and they said, enough. Where would you like to serve? And I said, well, I'll go to the Southwest if it has to be in the States. And I ended up in California, and I was there 4 years. And so by the time it came time to start thinking, what am I going to do? Because I really actually liked the military life very much, and was very successful in there. But the practical side of me said, I think you're going to need to don't you need to at least use some of this training to see if that's what you want to do? And of course, you know the answer to that. And so my first job was in Enfield, Connecticut, teaching a junior high school, which I did for 2 years. And in 2001, not 2001, let's see, 1973, holy smokes. I got this job there in 71. I got out, taught in Enfield for 2 years, and then my dad told me, he says, I'm going to retire. And of course, the bells went off in my head. I said, here it is. What are you going to do? Well, thankfully, I was smart enough to take the opportunity when it presented itself. And my father retired in, 73, and I started in 73. Dad left in June, and I walked in the door in late August.
So it's just a legacy of Davis's.
Well, you know, looking back now, it's something I'm very proud of. Dad did a wonderful job there, and he was there 28 years. And as it turned out, when I retired, that was the 28 years for me in Naugatuck.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and so it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, when we were up visiting you, you showed me the pictures and the posters that each of your students brought. So when you retired, you had 28 posters and you had students from each of those 28 years come and honor you. So you must have made such a huge impression. Why do you think that is, that students become so connected with their music teachers?
Well, I think it's more not just a music teacher, but any teacher. In my case, in the music teacher's case, generally speaking, if you get them as a freshman and you're doing your job and enjoying it in the process, you're gonna keep those kids for 4 years, and they'll see you every day. And you can, especially some you get pretty close to. I always call them my kids, but in some ways they are my kids, and I feel strongly about that. So, but if you treat those students that way and think of them not as this student that walks in the door and then he's gone, but in my case, my kids, you can't help but establish, in some cases, a very strong bond there.
Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, you have the music. What sort of things did you teach your students? You had choral, but then you also taught some other subjects as well, right?
I also taught 3 other courses, which I felt strongly about needed to be in the curriculum. And one was a music history course, and I like history anyway. And so in music history, thanks to a professor at NYU, became a very viable living. I just really liked it. And I like to see, if you were start reading about Johann Sebastian Bach, what went on in his life besides his music. Well, all his kids, couple wives, getting along with people that didn't really want to get along with him, that kind of thing. And so I did music history. I taught music theory, and music theory is something I just loved. When I took it as an undergrad, I remember so many of my fellow students, it was music theory to them was a drag.
Right.
And they just, oh, geez, I don't want to, let me get through this and get on with my musical life. And of course, you would have all your homework and things to write out and work with. And sometimes I would get some really, banal things to harmonize or whatever so you would understand. And I early on said, I can do this pretty quickly. So how can I make this musically the best thing it can possibly be, given what this thing they gave me to harmonize, and loved doing that. It was this wonderful challenge that I had, and I wanted my students who were interested in the music theory part of our musical world, um, have them to feel the same way. Mm-hmm. And then the third course I taught was a voice class. Again, just makes sense. Voice class was interesting because about half the kids in it were not in my choirs.
Really?
It was a kid in school that decided they wanted to be the next rock star or whatever. And I wanted to sing. I remember one girl came in and I was teaching some vocalies with her and getting her to drop her jaw and, and expand that sound in there. And I said, you got to drop the jaw and get the mouth bigger, open it up. And I did. She had a piercing in the middle of her tongue. Had this big metal thing and pierced into the middle. I about died. But I other than I said, why did you do that? I couldn't help it. So, but then I just backed off and, hey, if you can deal with it, so can I. So, but anyway.
So how do you do that? How do you make something like music theory or music history? I mean, you have a passion for it, obviously, but how do you get that passion to go into your students so that they also are interested in it?
Well, the music theory, kids who were there wanted to be there in the first place. And two, several of them, I can think back on some in particular, were very gifted, talented. And we knew right away by the time they came to me for music theory, their goal was to go into music as a profession. And so my job was to teach them how this stuff on the printed page works. And so as fast as possible, as example, you got to know your scales. You got to know all your key signatures. You got to know it immediately. You can't stop and let me see. No. You can't do that. And so you could, when you're working on a piece, you can, if it's an A flat major, you can start thinking in A flat major what that means as you're writing. Or back in my day, it was still theory was pencil and paper, not like computers now. But I guess I'm a pretty enthusiastic guy in a classroom, and I would walk around and we'd be doing something, and I stop and I turn and I say, Joey, it said, name all the sharps in C sharp minor, and but I did it till, and then of course if they panicked, we would all laugh, and including me, because I'd been there once too, and so you kind of get that rapport with them, and you care about them, and you want them to be as good a version of them as they can possibly be, and that's the whole goal of this teaching thing anyway. Yeah. I just happen to use music to get there.
Yeah, and it worked really, really well. Now, tell me about some of these fun concert tours that you went on. You went all around New England and you went to Europe a few times. Now that means you probably had very, very supportive administration in order to do these sort of things. But how did those tours come about?
Well, when I first started teaching, I had the opportunity to do, when I got to Naugatuck High School, I said, we got to be able to do something besides just prepare for a concert at the auditorium. And I had colleagues, friends of mine scattered around New England and other places, and we would talk once in a while, and eventually came to, hey, you've got a good choral program, and so do I. Why don't we get together on a weekend and do an exchange? I'll come to your place, and then you'll come to mine. And we'll combine in the concerts, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how we started doing exchanges. And I did that, all over New England. I did one with with a fellow, a friend of mine down in uh, Virginia, Fairfax, Virginia. I did another one. It was in Maryland. And I always told my students, I said, because I would get on them once in a while about being casual about this or that, and especially about of all things, their behavior. And I said, what our goal is to do what we do the best we possibly can, and that our conduct has to be above reproach. It says, my goal is we will go travel somewhere and we come back, and the administration doesn't hear anything about anything other than good info. And it said, if we never give them a reason, if they can't come up with a reason to say no, because we've done everything we're supposed to do and then some, then they're going to say yes. And they will trust us. And if we keep proving that we are up to the task, they will continue to say yes. And that worked out. One of my biggest allies was the superintendent of schools in Naugatuck. And he was a big fan. He came to every concert. He had a seat. He'd say, Bill, I want to sit in this seat right over here and make sure you save it for me. And he and his wife would come. And that was his seat. And even the students started talking about this Mr. Dowling's seat, that kind of thing. But he was the biggest, and we would come up with, in 1982, I decided, all this good stuff was going on in the elementary and middle schools, and yet, other than the parents in that school, nobody knows about what the other school's doing. And so I organized and formed a borough music festival that involved students in the music programs from grade 4 up to a senior in high school.
Oh, wow.
And I presented it to Mr. Dowling. Ray Dowling was his name. Wonderful man. And I made my pitch and explained the value and why. And he sat there and he says, I like that idea. Says, let's do it. Says, I'll bring it up with my principals meeting. He met with the principals every week. And I heard later on, he brought it up there, and several principals didn't like it because it took too much time out of the curriculum day to when you start bringing the kids together, and you got to pay for the buses to get them there over to the high school, et cetera, et cetera. And Mr. Dowling listened to him, and one of my friends who was a principal in another school said, he listened, and then he said, gentlemen, we're going to do this music festival here in the Borough Music Festival here in town, okay? And we are going to support it. Says, now, the next item I have. And that was it. And when you have a superintendent who is as supportive as that, and principals who eventually got on board if they weren't sure at first, it's just don't shoot yourself in the foot and do a good job with what you do. And you get that across to the kids as well, because they ultimately want to do a good job too. They don't want to just screw around. Well, some do, but we convinced them otherwise.
So what were some of the benefits of getting all the schools together and doing these big festivals?
Well, selfishly, it gave me a wonderful feeder program that these kids starting in 4th grade, because in the concert, my chamber singers would sing in the concert, the Borough Music Festival, and they would get to hear, oh, I can do that. And so by the time it came time for them to matriculate to Naugatuck High School as a freshman, I had many of them, and I would go down and do auditions at both middle schools. And I took time to go down there and arrange it with the school principal there and the music teachers. And we call all these kids down, and worked very well, but I had an audition sequence that I did with each kid. And boy, you found some wonderful kids very quickly. And But the other part of it is kids in Salem Elementary School could hear what the kids in Hot Brook are doing, could hear what the kids in Central Avenue are doing, could hear what the kids in Cross Street are doing, and so on.
Uh-huh.
And it just made it a lot of fun. And of course, to these young kids, this thing was a big deal. To get on a bus, go over to the high school auditorium, and so it was a lot of fun, and it's still going. I'm happy to say I retired in 2001, and a couple of years ago, it was still going, and they asked me back to be a guest conductor for the festival. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, I bet that was so special.
It was. Oh. And the auditorium is the Davis Auditorium.
Is it? Is it named after you or your dad?
Both. It's the Davis ×2 auditorium, which is pretty nice.
Those festivals sound like such a valuable experience to your students. But you also went on a lot of tours, and some of them internationally. What are some of the places that you went?
We went to, we pretty much covered Western Europe, to be honest. We performed and traveled in England, and we were in London and in Cambridge. We were in Ireland. We were in Dublin, where in the center of Dublin, you can turn in every direction and see a Guinness sign. Just that was pointed out to me. Anyway, we were in France, sang in Paris, sang in Caen, sang at the Normandy D-Day beachhead. We were in Italy, in Rome, and in Florence. Austria, Germany. We got around.
To say the least.
Which was great. 6 different concert tours we did. That was with my chamber singers.
I'm sure you have lots of fun stories from that.
Well, we do. I'll do 2 quick ones. We were in Vienna. End of the day, we got to our hotel, and you're in these long, coach buses, and they park the buses underneath in a garage underneath the hotel. And the guy would come around a corner and go to drive in, and there's this guy that's parked his small car illegally right on the corner, and he couldn't make the turn without basically smashing the car. And so we're saying, what are we going to do? And there's nobody around to ask. And then the driver turns around and he said, you've got some big, strong boys here. He said, I figure 6 to 8 guys can move it. So I turned around and asked him, well, you would have thought, I'll be right there, D, just a minute. And I had about 8 or 9 guys jump out of their chairs. We went out, and it was a Fiat. And they picked the thing up, and they got underneath it, got ready, and they got one of the guys that was the leader of the group, and they lifted the thing up and put it on the sidewalk. He said, so the bus driver, he took the bus around and down into the drive, and then he stopped and he said, when you put the car back, put it back so the guy's going to know that it was moved. So we did. We put the back end of it, turned around a completely different way, and up on the sidewalk. So, all I know, he got a ticket anyway. That was so funny. And then these guys, they get back on the bus, big, strong guys, and of course, all the girls, they, oh, you're so wonderful. They did. It was fun. It was really funny. But one other quick one. We were right outside of Paris, and we had gone, and it'll lead into my other story that's quite touching. We very quickly, D-Day was in 1944, and on the 50th anniversary year, there was an organization in France that invited from each state a performing group to come and perform in a concert. And our high school was asked that year to be the one from Connecticut. And it included not just my chamber singers, but part of the concert choir and the concert band with parents. It was 172 people, a logistical nightmare. And anyway, we said yes, we would come, raised an enormous amount of money to do so, but we did. We went. We're outside of Paris, and we're traveling in 4 buses. The 4th bus also has a trailer attached to it. And we had been, I think this was on the way in from the airport. And we got about 10 miles outside of, and the 4 buses had to get really spread apart from each other. And we come to one of these roundabouts, these big huge roundabouts. And again, what are we going to do? And all the drivers are talking with each other. And when I first said, keep going around the roundabout. So we did it. We went around, and as we came around the first time, we picked up the second bus. And then the 2 buses go around, it's 2 or 3 times. We picked up the 3rd bus. And so here's these 3 buses still going around the roundabout. And finally, the 4th bus with the trailer shows up. We all go around once just for ha-ha's sake, and then we headed in. It had to be the funniest thing. It's one of those things you had to be there, but we weren't. So it was good. It was good. The very touching thing that happened because of being there in Normandy, obviously we were there because of the D-Day remembrance. And one of the wonderful things that we were able to do is a colleague of mine, Frank Johnson, was a D-Day veteran. And he landed on Omaha Beach when he was 19, a year older than a lot of my seniors. And we invited him to go. And after quite a bit of reflection, he said, I will go. And we went talking with his wife before he went. He says, I'm amazed that he'll go. He said, he's never talked about that part of World War II, his experiences. He's never said a word about it. And anyway, we got there and we went to where we were going to sing a short performance, and the concert band was going to play overlooking Normandy Cemetery. It had 9,000 graves there. And we got there, lined up, did our performance, and then we had about an hour to walk down and look over the beachhead, and we had to walk through and along the cemetery. And I happened to look down, and here's Frank Johnson walking in. He had 8 or 9 of my students with him, just kind of all gathered around him, almost like a mother hen. And I could see him talking and pointing to the kids. And it really was quite moving, quite touching. And the kids, I talked to them later, and they were very touched. And the other thing connected with Frank, that evening we did a concert in Caen, which was destroyed in the war. And there's a conservatory of music. And we did a concert there, the band and the choirs. And at the end of it, they introduced Frank after the final applause. And they introduced Frank as being a veteran who basically, as a kid, had at some point after he landed, walked through their town, even though it was destroyed. He was in there. The audience stood up, gave him a standing ovation. And a very long one. It went on for, several minutes. And then we were done, and so on. People walked around and chatted, so on. And Frank was standing there very moved. And then kind of drips and drabs, but about 30 very elderly people came up to him and gathered around him. And they wanted to shake his hand. He said, I was a kid when you came through here. And thank you. And there must have been, I don't know, 20 or 30 people. It was wonderful. And you know, Frank got home back to Naugatuck. And his wife told me that next weekend they had a family dinner and he talked about his experiences for the first time. And he talked to his family. And he said that trip enabled him to come to grips with those memories. So it was wonderful. And again, you seize these kind of opportunities to teach the kids something besides, we teach them the music and they're going to do it really well. But there are other things to be taught too. And you get those chances, and they don't happen very often, but they do happen once in a while. So,
wow, what a story! You've had so many of these stories, so many of these. You say they don't happen often, but you have so many fulfilling stories, so many wonderful stories that have happened.
Yeah.
So you've had this incredible life, an incredible career as an educator and as a teacher. And I know that so many musicians want to, be the next, rock star or the next Yo-Yo Ma or the next, superstar. But there's not as much draw for kids, just talking about it to be like a high school music teacher. But then listening to you, what a fulfilling and beautiful life and beautiful career that you've had. Would you suggest and would you recommend students now going into education? Would you tell them to do that?
Yes, I would, but only for the right reasons. If they want to be the next Billy Joel, go to a conservatory, get your training, but don't go to music education if you want to be the next Billy Joel, And I like Billy Joel, by the way. Love his music. If you want to make a difference in a teenager's life that's lasting, that in many cases is much needed, then you can make a good living as an educator. You won't make a lot of money, but you can have great experiences. You can touch kids' lives. You can make a difference. You really can. I'm thinking here, sitting. I can think of several of my former students who went into music education and have all been very successful, and I'm very proud of them because they followed the blueprint, I guess, a little bit of what I tried to teach them, and they just gone further with it and done wonderful things. And some of the things that they have had to do getting through the pandemic to have the kids still have that musical experience, to help the kids adjust how to deal with COVID, it was a very difficult time. And what they had to do to make that happen, forget about getting paid by the hour. It was, you make the decision of, this is what needs to be done, and this is what I'm going to do. And you don't sit there and add up the hours and see if it's worth it or not. If it's worth it and it needs to be done, then it's worth it. Therefore, it needs to be done. And that's what you do. And I've had several do that. and very, as I said, very proud of them. Doing great jobs in there. Wonderful teachers.
And then looking back on your life, would you choose to be a music educator again?
Yes. I probably do things a little differently. I don't know what, to be honest. My advisor when I was at NYU, I told him when I was graduating, and we were chatting, and it came out that had been to ROTC and I'm going on active duty in the Air Force. And he was incredulous. He said, "You're what?" He said, "I was going to talk to you about, there's a college out in the Midwest, a friend of mine, and they're looking for PhD candidates. Just you're the kind of person they're looking for, and I was going to write a recommendation." And I said, "Well, Uncle Sam kind of trumps that right at the moment." So who knows what would have happened? But all I know is that I have made lifelong friends, not just with my colleagues, but with my students. And then that I see, I get a phone call out of the blue. Had one that stopped a little while ago and said, "I'm bringing my daughter down to Keene State. Can I stop by?" Stop by. We'll stop for dinner, which they did. And that happens a lot. And you can't trade that onto something else. So would I do it again? Yes, I would.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
And thanks to my dad for being such a wonderful example.
Thank you.
I can tell you more, but you don't have time, and that's okay.
We'll talk more after.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that's a beautiful place to end this. That's why we do what we do.